So today we're going to continue with section 4. Today the method we're going to learn about solving quadratic equations is completing the square. So these are the steps. I know it's a lot of words here, but these are the steps that you need to follow. Now, one thing that we need to be aware of is the standard form for the quadratic. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So our equation is always going to be set equal to 0. And then the number in front of x squared is the a term. The number in front of x will be your b, and then the constant is your c. So the first thing we're going to do when we solve this is make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1. If it's not, then we have to divide all the terms by that coefficient. Then from there, we're going to move the constant to the other side of the equal sign. We're going to take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. We're going to add that squared number to both sides, and then to keep our equation balanced. Once we add it to the left side, it turns the left side into a perfect square trinomial. And then when I factor it, it's going to be a binomial squared. And then I use the square root method. So I know I just said a whole bunch of words, but as we do the practice, you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and try some examples. So here's my first example. Again, my goal here is to first check that make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1, and it is. Step number 2, I'm going to take the constant and I'm going to move it to the other side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 14 to both sides. Now, once I do this, I'm going to leave the little blank space here. So I'm going to leave like a little gap here because this is where I'm going to put in my b term divided by 2 and squared. So the next step is to take the b term, which here is -4. I'm going to divide it by 2, and then I'm going to square it. So this becomes -2 squared, which is +4. This is the number that I'm adding to both sides. Now, just to show you, it would go in here, and it would go in here. Now, I'm actually going to change the left side because I'm going to show you what's going to make your life so much easier. Because now what my next step is to combine the 14 and the 4, but then to factor the left side. That's a perfect square trinomial. Now, instead of having to sit here and think, what are the factors of 4 that are going to give me -4, if you place, instead of putting it in as this on the left side, put it in here like this, what it was before it was squared. So if I erase this, and on the left side, I'm actually going to put this in and as a -2 squared. Because now when I go to factor this trinomial, whatever number is here is going to go with my x. So I'm just going to put x minus 2 squared equals 18. I now have something that looks like yesterday's notes. And here's where I use the square root method. So I square root both sides. This comes out. This becomes plus and minus the square root of 18. I need to break down the square root of 18. So if I do my factor tree here, this becomes, I'll do 2 times 9. Now, if you're good at recognizing 9's a perfect square, just square root it. And the square root of 18 is 3 radical 2. So now I have x minus 2 equals plus and minus 3 square root 2. I now need to move over the 2. And x is equal to 2 plus or minus 3 square root 2. And you're done. Now, remember, this plus minus sign actually means that there's 2 separate answers. And when you're doing these questions where you're going to get WebAssign's going to ask you to put it in as two different answers. Let me double check that. Tonight when you're doing the homework or for Friday, WebAssign's going to again make you separate it with a comma, and they're not asking you about the order. So here you could do it as 2 minus 3 radical 2, comma 2 plus 3 radical 2. Yes, Marcos.
What is the negative 2 squared at the top?
The negative 2 squared. Okay, so what I did was up at the top, this right here. So I took the b term, which is negative 4. I take it and divide it by 2, square it, and then that's what I'm adding to both sides of the equation. So over on the right side, I entered it in as a 4. But on the left side, just so I don't have to think about factoring that trinomial, I'm going to put it in what it was before it was squared. So it's always the b term divided by 2 and squared. That's what you're going to be adding to both sides. Good? Okay, let's try another one. Again, make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1. It is. So the next thing I'm going to do is move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I get x squared plus 6x, leave a blank space, and then equals 1. I now take this b term, this 6, I'm dividing it by 2, and I'm squaring it. So I get 3 squared, and I get 9. So now, for the left side, I'm going to put it in here as 3 squared. But for the right side, I'm going to put it in as plus 9. Everybody with me so far? Now when I go to factor this trinomial, because essentially what this trinomial is it's really x squared plus 6x plus 9. And honestly, you don't want to have to think about what are the factors in 9 that give me 6. If you put this in here as what it was when you just divided it by 2, then the binomial squared is just whatever this number is with the sign of the middle. And now I use my square root method. So I square root this side and this side. This becomes x plus 3 is equal to plus and minus the square root of 10. If I try to break down 10, it's just 2 times 5. There's no pairs in there. So I'm just going to move the 3 over. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus radical 10. Now, again, in WebAssign tonight, you're going to enter it as negative 3 minus square root 10, comma, negative 3 plus square root 10. That's what you'll put in as your 2 answers. Let's try number 3. I know I went a little bit into it. So again, make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1. It is. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5. Move the constant. So now I have x squared plus 2x, leave a blank space, and then the constant. Take the b term, divide it by 2. So 2 divided by 2 squared. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So I'm adding 1 over here, and then in here I'll put the 1 squared. So then really what you're doing when you factor this is just take that yellow and put it in as a binomial squared. Go ahead and add the 5 plus 1, and you get 6. I now apply the square root method. Square root the left, square root the right. X plus 1 comes out, plus or minus the square root of 6. 6 cannot be broken down any further, so just move the 1 over. So x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. And again, for WebAssign, you would enter it as -1 minus radical 6, comma, no space, -1 plus square root 6 as your two answers. So number 4, again, check to make sure that there's not a number in front of x squared, and there's not. So move the constant. Step number 1 is move the constant. X squared plus 7x, leave a blank space, equals -12. I now take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. Now, don't be tempted to make this into a decimal. Leave it the fraction. So, and you can square it. So 7/2 times 7/2 is 49/4. So in here is where I'm going to put the plus 49/4. But in here, I'm going to put the 7/2 squared. Now, for the left side, it's just x plus 7/2 squared. But I actually have to find a common denominator and do the math over here on the right side. I actually have to do this problem here. So -12/1 plus 49/4. My common denominator is 4. So this will turn into -48/4, the whole number 12. And then I add it to the positive 49/4, which now gives me 1/4. I now apply the square root method. So I'm going to square root both sides. So square root this side and this side. The x plus 7/2 comes out. I can square root the 1/4 individually. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. So plus and minus 1/2. Now, notice the radical disappeared. I actually have to do the two problems here. So, and I know I've run out of room. Let me move this over to here. So I now have x plus 7/2 equals plus or minus 1/2. I'm going to move the 7/2. X is equal to -7/2 plus or minus 1/2. So now what I need to do here is do two problems. I'm first going to do -7/2 minus 1/2, and then -7/2 plus 1/2. Do the two problems. So this becomes -8/2, which is -4, and this becomes -6/2, which is -3. So my two answers to this problem are x equals -3 and x equals -4. So when the radical is totally gone and you do the square root method, you actually have to do the math and get the numbers. You can't leave it as -7/2 minus 1/2 and -7/2 plus 1/2. You actually have to do the math there. Pretty good there? All right, let's try number 5. Again, make sure that there's not a number in front of x squared. There's not. So I'm going to move my constant. I'm going to add 6. So add 6 to both sides. X squared minus 3x, leave a blank space, equals 6. Take the b term, divide it by 2. So -3 divide by 2 squared. This becomes positive 9/4. But again, remember, I'm going to put the 9/4 over here, but over here, I'm going to put it in as the -3/2 squared. So now when I go to set up my binomial, it's just x minus 3/2 squared Again, I got to do the math on this one. So I'm going to take my whole number 6, put a 1 under it. Common denominator is 4. I'm going to change this into 24 over 4. And then I can add 24 plus 9, and I get 33 over 4. So that's this side now, 33 over 4. And now I apply the square root method. So square root this side, x minus 3 over 2 is equal to plus and minus. And again, if you want to root them separately, you can. The bottom is a perfect square. So it ends up being x minus 3 over 2 equals plus and minus the square root of 33 over 2. So then let me rewrite it up here so I have more room. So just x minus 3 over 2 plus or minus root 33 over 2. I'm going to add the 3 over 2. And x is equal to 3 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2. You can either leave it apart like that, or if you realize they both have the common denominator of 2, you can also write your answer like this, with a single denominator. Either way. But again, on WebAssign, it's going to ask you to pull it apart. What they might also do is write the answer like this, 1/2. And then what they'll put is 3 plus or minus radical 33. So it'll also be written this way. And then they'll pull it apart. 3 minus radical 33, comma, 1/2, 3 plus radical 33. So all these are all different versions of it. Be able to recognize it, because you never know what's going to happen on, say, an SAT. All right, now the harder one, and I guess we'll do the harder ones tomorrow. Got through half of them.